Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about Galactic Cruise, and our copy was provided for review, but the thoughts in this video are all our own.
Galactic Cruise is a 1 to 4 player game designed by TK King, Koltin, Thompson, and Dennis Northcott. And this is a very heavy worker placement game that takes about 1.5 to 2.5 hours, where you are planning cruises in the stars. And so we're going to start with a very brief overview of how to play.
Galactic Cruise is a big game, so this will just be a quick overview, but you start the game with some money, ads, a couple of workers, a cockpit and an engine, a large player board, and an even larger game board filled with spacefaring opportunities. On your turn, you will place a worker, which will let you do things like gain blueprints for your ship, build a blueprint into a section in a ship, get a new cockpit and engine combo for a new ship, gain supplies that will help you launch a ship, refill those supplies, buy supplies and ads, schedule a cruise to get ready to fly, advertise your cruise so you've got passengers, draw agenda cards which give you bonuses, refill those agenda cards, build developments which give you access to more actions and special abilities, hire expert workers, or launch a cruise, which will mean running through a pre-launch checklist and then shooting off into space. The game ends once the shared progress track has been filled, which will happen throughout the game from launching cruises and completing goals, at which point you'll add up all the points you scored during the game, 2 points for a final annual general meeting, extra resources, the reputation track, built ship segments, cleared development columns, and your cockpits. And then the greatest cruise director is named.
That was a quick overview of how to play, but there is a lot more to it than that. We didn't even mention a few things like the reputation track, which you can keep gaining reputation, but you can also spend it to get some much needed resources, and the income that you get when your workers come back that can also give you some bonuses.
And I kind of like that with all of that stuff, there's this interesting kind of dichotomy of there's like this fantastical theme where you're running these galactic cruises and you're running cruises actually through the stars, but then also you are just running a company. So there's also this kind of like mundane stuff that you're doing, like when you're coming back, you're actually going on your coffee breaks and gaining things from your coffee breaks, and I think it's called like a staff meeting or something. But then also when you're putting out your tokens for the goals and for going on cruises, you're setting off these annual general meetings is what they're called. And that is part of like what the scoring is as well. So that's really cool that you're like building spaceships and you're flying in space, but then also you're just doing annual general meeting and having like quarterly profit shares.
Yeah, and the theme is really good that they really tried to make it super integrated, because it very much is an interconnected system. It is like a Lacerda game in terms of all of these bits that you need to do, and everything is super, super tight. So it is really thinky as you're trying to maximize your turns. So I like that like heaviness and that thinkiness is counteracted by this lighter theme.
Yeah, and it is fun that it's kind of light in two different ways, but you're right that this really does feel like a Lacerda game. This probably feels the most like a Lacerda game of a non-Lacerda game that I've ever played. And I mean that in the nicest possible way too. I really like Lacerda games, but this feels like kind of that really sweet kind of middle spot of his games. So my favorite of his games is probably Kanban or Kanban. I'm never sure how to say it, but also the Gallerist. And I feel like this kind of falls in that sweet spot where it's not quite to that level of like On Mars where I just feel like my head is actually overheating, but it's still like a lot going on, and there's quite a puzzle here.
Yeah, and I think part of riding that line is you always feel like you can do actions. And every time we've played it, I've realized like new things or new opportunities that I hadn't taken advantage of before. And so I like that It's really thinky, but you're never stuck.
You can definitely dig yourself out of those holes, but it does have that like interesting combo because every time you go out, you're doing 2 actions. And so you really need to use those cogs because those actions are randomized and you like sometimes they kind of fit together, but often they don't really. You often need to be able to reach because you can do an action from where you are. And then you can use the cogs to do connected actions. You can pay other people for their cogs, but you don't really want to do that because everything is tight in this game. All the money, all the ads, all the resources, everything is tight. You don't want to waste any of it. So having those cogs out, you're right, it does make a huge, huge difference, but it's a big cost up front. And so it's like a lot of this is deciding what do I need to pay for now versus what am I smarter to save that money and spend it on this other thing and then wait till later. And there's a lot of different paths you can go down. I've played this 5 times now. None of those games have felt the same to me.
Yeah, like it is driving you to try and do as many cruises as possible, for sure. But our first game, we definitely felt like we had to make sure we did everything to the full extent possible to launch those cruises. And I don't know if you necessarily do. I think you could probably get a lot of points by launching like smaller cruises and just trying to do more of them as well. But there is a lot you can like keep exploring to try and see those different ways that you can get those points.
Yeah, and to launch those cruises too, because definitely our first game, we were like, okay, I need to have exactly the resources, exactly the people, exactly the, like everything. And then you kind of realize, you know what, I can spend that reputation on the reputation track to get a few of those resources. I can use my cards, I can discard my cards to get those resources. And you find those other avenues, and you kind of realize that stuff, I don't ever really want to go back on that reputation track, but you realize that is really a resource track. Like that is really, you need to be gathering resources from that because that's going to save you that extra action. So yeah, finding those other avenues it really makes for an interesting puzzle.
So let's move on to replayability because of all of those different avenues you can go down means you can play this a lot of times. But one of the key things that changes all of the time is those worker placement actions and how they pair because those are completely randomized and which 2 actions go together and which actions go next to each other is going to make each game feel different.
Yeah, it really, really does change things. It changes things more than you'd expect because your first game, they've got half of the board is printed just for your first game with all of those in like very sensible pairs, and the bonus that you get for your big guys and the special actions on the top of the board are all kind of the simpler versions of it too. But once you shuffle all that stuff up, and especially those actions, holy cow, like when you aren't getting your blueprints at the same time that you're building your chunks of your ship, that really makes a big difference. And it really can feel just a lot trickier some games than other games.
Yeah, and there's also the agenda cards, and those are like game-breaking cards that give you a one-off bonus, or you can use them as resources. But every time I'm so tempted to use it for their ability because they can feel really strong.
Yeah, those abilities are super strong, but you also have to spend those to refill the resource track. And so that can be really tough because you don't want to get rid of any of those because they are all so strong. And also the end game goals change. I think there's 7 different tiles of that. There are these special powers technologies, I think they're called, at the top of the board. Those change each game. There's also a special power for your big guy. And there's like 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 of those as well that swap out, and those are going to happen every time you put out that character, and so that's going to make a big difference as well. So there are a lot of things that are going to move around in this game.
Yeah, and because there's also your cruise ships themselves, because one of the key ways you score points is by launching them, and how they score are all different. So depending on which top part you have will like drive you to different directions as well.
Yeah, and even just the actual tours that you take, because we've had games where those are all costing us like 2 fuel, and they're very short tours. And then they're a lot easier to go on because all of the resources are really tight. So if you've got a longer tour, you just need more resources. But if you've got the short ones, you can go on them really quick. But then last game we had, everything was like 4 or 5 that started. And so it took us a lot longer to go on that first tour, but by the time we did, we had a bunch of ships all set up to go on all these tours. And so just the pace of the game changed so much just from that little bit of it. So yeah, there's a lot of variability in this box.
The game plays for 1 to 4, and I've only played it at 2 players, and it works really well as a 2-player game. There are a few little things you have to do. You put out some neutral cogs at the very beginning. You also have these other colored workers that you put out, and you just bump those workers along the spaces as well, and some more cogs go out throughout the game. But other than that, there's like not a bot or anything that you have to run, so it makes it really straightforward. And because it's such a thinky game, I really like it at 2, because I mean, you're very quick when you play, but I don't have to wait super long before it gets back to my turn.
Yeah, you can definitely feel like, I'm sure if you were to play this at 4 players, that it could take a little while, because there is quite a bit of planning on a turn. Because we'll even have, generally we do play fairly quick, but there'll be a few points in the game where you just kind of hit something and you're like, oh, okay, I gotta stop and I gotta puzzle this out for a little bit. And so this is a game where you can easily have like 3, 4, even 5-minute turn as you're really puzzling that stuff out. So just know that if you play with slower people and you're going to play with 4 of them, you're going to make sure you're packing some snacks. Because even for 2 and even playing quickly, this is going to take us a good 2 hours when we're playing at like super speed.
Another thing that changes with more players is the amount of cubes that takes for each stage. So the more players you play with, the more cubes that are needed to activate the next stage. I do wonder though if you're going to do less tours at more players, but we'd have to play to find out. And you're probably going to be more likely to get your worker bumped possibly at more players too, because at 2, I'm really trying to not bump your worker. But when there's just a lot of workers on the board, you're going to have to bump somebody.
Yeah, at 4 players, people are getting bumped. And there is also a solo mode in this, and it's quite a good solo mode. It's a full bot that isn't too difficult to run. There is kind of 4 pages of the rule book that you're going to have to read, and you're going to have to check back to, because like the cards don't fully explain everything. So there's a few things you're just going to have to kind of remember with it. But it does a good job, and it basically does the same thing as an opponent, but without too much overhead. But still, because this is such a thinky game, I would not try and run that until I played this a few times, because you do have to kind of do your thing and then switch brains and do their thing. And then when you come back to it, I've definitely had a few turns where I'm like, what was I doing now? Because I had to have this brain, now I go back to this brain. So I did find that it got a little slow, but I think if I played that after I'd had kind of 5, 6 games under my belt, I'd be a lot more comfortable with that. And it's a really solid solo mode.
Moving on to components, this is a gorgeous game. The art is by Ian O'Toole, so it's not a surprise that it looks so lovely. And all of the iconography, all of the graphic design is really clear, but they really did seem to try and integrate theme as much as they could. Because even when you open it up, there's like a welcome letter and a lanyard for like going on a Galactic Cruise.
Yeah, this game honestly annoys me. As someone who's making a game and trying to put out a game, they've set the bar like ludicrously high. Like everything about it. The QR code on the box had like spaceship on it. It's just silly how much they've thought about all of the details. All of the storage even inside of it is just really nice. It's perfect. It's got space for everything. It's got space for expansions to go in the future, or if you got the extra stuff, I think maybe that was optional with it. And we've got the like retail edition. There is somehow a fancier edition of this game out there. I can't even picture that, because this is like double layer board, screen printed minis. Everything just looks lovely.
Yeah, I can't think of a complaint. Everything looks lovely. Everything functionally works really well. A lot of the bits that you interchange are all like make sense and have enough options, and like even all of the tiles that you're putting out all come in a storage container as well, just making it super easy to like set up. It still takes a little bit of setup, but it's been simplified as much as it could be.
They've just really put the love into this game, and you can tell. So that brings us to final thoughts. I think the first thing to point out here, and we've talked about it already, is that this is quite a heavy game. So this is going to be for gamers that have a lot of games under your belt. Like you don't just want to jump from Wingspan to this guy. This is just, there's a lot of steps between that. But if you feel like this is the sort of challenge that you want to take on, there is a lot in here. This is just a really interesting puzzle that's got a lot of different moving parts. You can move in a lot of different ways, and it is going to trip you up sometimes when you realize that you just needed that one more thing, and now you've got to kind of waste 2 actions to get that thing. And it is definitely going to reward people who are going to think ahead and plan ahead, and it's the sort of thing that you're going to get better at. But I like that in a game. I like a game that in my 10th play, I feel like I'm better than I was in my 9th play. That it's fun to feel that progression.
And I like the theme of this as well, because it could potentially be a really dry game. It has a whole bunch of integrated systems. Resources are incredibly tight. So I like that it has a bit of a lighter, more fun theme and different from other like heavy Euro games I've played. It's not about farming. It's not like a beige looking game. This is still like an interesting, different theme.
Yeah, it is. And I do think that that is going to help bring folks into this as well, because even like all of the little bits that you put into your ship, there's like a holographic dinosaur one, and there's just like a lot of silliness within that, and there are kind of little tongue-in-cheek jokes throughout the game. You don't find that a lot in very heavy Euros. Usually they take themselves very seriously, and it's nice that this doesn't quite, like it's a serious game, but that it has that little bit of fun in there, so it still feels very gamey. It doesn't feel like work.
And I would say in terms of like player count, we really liked it at 2 because of how much thinking is needed. But if you are okay with a lot of downtime, I could see people also enjoying it at more, given that caveat, because of the bumping of the workers and that little bit of interaction you get.
So I think at the end of it, we obviously like this game, but there is going to be an audience for this, and there's going to be an audience that, you know, tries this and thinks, "Ooh, that was a lot. That was an awful lot of games." So just go into it knowing this is going to be a lot of game. And that is it. That is Galactic Cruise. Have you played Galactic Cruise? What did you think? And what are some other heavy Euros that you have enjoyed? Please let us know in the comments.
Thank you so much for watching. As usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.